Hey guys, so this week I've been playing Ni No Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch, which if you've never heard of, it's this Japanese role-playing game that's also done with Studio Ghibli, who are the people who animated movies like Howl's Moving Castle, Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, and all these really great Japanese animated cartoons. So the game looks like one of those, but does it play very good? Does it play like a game that I want to play? Does it feel like just some sort of movie game to a movie that never existed? Well, here's my opinion of Ni No Kuni. Ni No Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch is the story of Oliver, this young little boy who lives in this idyllic American-esque town. He's raised by his loving mother and enjoys a rather carefree childhood with all the things that you would expect. Until, of course, his mother dies. Inconsolable with grief, he cries into his stuffed animal, who turns out is not a stuffed animal, but this magical fairy creature. Turns out his name is Drippy, and he comes from a parallel universe, and he needs Oliver to go there and save the world from the dark wizard Shadar. So Oliver sets out on this magical adventure to save this parallel universe and possibly save his own mother. This parallel world is a world of magic where Oliver can cast spells and fight all kinds of creatures. But Oliver is not alone in his fighting. He has what are called familiars, basically summoned creatures that he uses to fight on his behalf. There's a variety of different types of these familiars that you can use to fight with, and much like Pokemon, you can go out in the world and try and capture other creatures to be your familiars. But one of the things that's interesting about the familiars is that they're not creatures, they're manifestations of your heart. So when they take damage, you take damage. So if you send a guy up and your familiar gets stomped, then you die. And also your familiars have a stamina meter, so they only last for so long before they start to weaken, so you kind of want to swap them out as you're fighting. The combat in the game is all done in real time. You select your familiar, you send him out, and then you choose what he does, and you have to wait sometimes to reuse an attack or use another magic spell. You and your familiar can also move around, so you can circle around and attack the monster from behind. And as you progress through the game, you actually pick up some party members who have familiars of their own to join in the battles. Defense plays a major part in the battles, because a lot of times, especially when you're fighting a boss, he'll send an attack that you can't avoid being hit by and does a lot of damage unless you're in a defensive stance. And also, sometimes when you're defending, if you get hit, these golden orbs drop out of the boss, and then you could actually use them to do these powerful super attacks. Despite the fact that the combat's in real time, it can be rather difficult, especially for people like me who played on easy and still have a hard time. But I never really felt like the combat was unfair. And if you happen to die, you can come back to life with just like a penalty to your gold. As you play the game and are exploring this expansive world, not only do you have to deal with all this stuff in this magical world, but sometimes you have to go back to the real world, quote unquote, and deal with things there. But oddly enough, no one ever comments on the fact that he's being followed by this magical creature or he's wearing a cape. It's almost like Oliver's making this whole thing up in his head. Oh my god, he's making this whole thing up! He can't deal with the fact that his mother's dead, so he created this entire fictional universe in order to try and save her from the fate that he can't. That's why there's a dark wizard, which is clearly his father, who abandoned him at some point, which is why you never see Shadar's face. And that's why he's stealing other people's hearts and he's trying to fix the whole world. He tries to save that blonde chick from her clearly abusive dad. He invented this whole thing where, oh, I use a magic spell, and then suddenly he's not a dick. Oh, it makes so much more sense now. Ni No Kuni is a very traditional Japanese game in the sense of just its length. The whole introduction into this world and the magic before you even really get to start playing the game takes quite a long time. And it's about 5 hours in before you pick up your first companion and find out that the game has kind of got all these Pokemon elements to it. And much like traditional games of this genre, when you enter a new area, the monsters are that much more powerful than the ones beforehand. So if you go running around in an area you're not prepared for, everything's going to kick your ass. It gives the sense that this game is sort of riding the line between perfectly paced and kind of grindy, because if you go around trying to avoid as many fights as possible, you're going to find that you're underpowered for the later stuff. But if you go around fighting a reasonable number of monsters and doing a lot of the side quests, then you'll find that it's not that bad. And while the gameplay is really well tuned and pretty well paced, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up things like, the story, the visuals, and the music. The game does this really great job of making it feel like I'm playing a Miyazaki film. Even though Miyazaki didn't have anything to do with it, it definitely feels like I'm in the middle of a Howl's Moving Castle or Princess Mononoke. If you're like me and you were drawn to this game purely by the aesthetic appeal of it, you'll find that when you get into it, the core of it is actually quite endearing. I spend a lot of my time playing like dumb shooters, so I don't ever really get a chance to play RPGs, especially Japanese RPGs. So when I do, I'm always like apprehensive. I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this. But I actually really like this game. It's fun. It's actually really charming, and there's this sense of adventure and wonderment to this whole thing. And a lot of games don't do that for me. And, there's Skyrims and other games where it's big open worlds, and you can have an adventure. But I never really feel like I'm having an adventure. This actually, I do. I feel the adventure going along, and it's got its dark moments, it's got its light moments. It's an incredibly fun game that I think if you're interested in sort of a more traditional Japanese role-playing game, or you're kind of into these types of games, definitely pick this up.